What I'd like to do, so it's the last class, and we've been really kind of informal about setting our motivation and things like that. And I thought for the last class especially, it might be nice, and I'm really sensitive, Doris, to putting people on the spot. I don't, it's a balance, and especially virtually, it's how do you like create an opportunity for interaction and then also, be mindful that everyone may not want to participate. But I thought it would be really nice if we, if everyone wanted to kind of, if you want to share or not, some personal sort of maybe motivation or dedication for this class. I'm happy to start. So I have a friend who actually a lovely ordained nun who had uterine cancer and just had her surgery earlier today. So, obviously my motivation is to be able to, well, maybe not obviously, but my motivation for being here is really to work on my own mind so that I can be of service and really help every living being ultimately. And then today, especially, I'm thinking of her and, wanting her to have a quick, easy recovery. And so my motivation today is to have, my motivation is to increase my own capacity up to and including full enlightenment. And then later, I'd like to dedicate the class for me, my personal practice and us being together towards her swift recovery and many other things. But I don't know if anyone else has anyone that they want us to bring to mind before we start our first meditation, or if you've got something happening that you kind of want us to pray for. Please, Doris.
Since you said, same motivation, different person, not that I'm excluding your friend. My teacher is quite ill, and I hope that he has a speedy recovery and lives long. I'm not sure that I could do without him. So that's my motivation, and I will dedicate my practice to that.
Thank you. Anybody else want to, Sergio, and it's totally fine to pass on that. If you don't want to share, if you want to share, maybe just kind of signal.
What was your question, Bonnie? My speakers are working now.
Oh, wonderful. So just we're setting the motivation, which of course, being here is to increase our own capacity and tame our own minds so that we can be helpful to all living beings. But I thought to kind of open it to maybe some sort of personal thing, if there's someone that you'd like us to have in mind during the session, and then at the end we can kind of dedicate towards a person or a situation. And if you don't want to share, that's fine too.
Okay, I don't really want to now. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Paula, for helping. I plugged it in again. That helped. Thank you.
Okay. So then, whatever your own personal motivation is, let's all just bring that to mind. And then if you can also think of Doris's teacher, and then my friend, Venerable Jigme. And, any being out there who's suffering. And then let's start with a meditation. Let's focus on our breath. And just imagine with every inhalation that you're breathing in pure white light that's totally cleansing your body, your mind, your speech, of every negativity. And then with every exhalation, imagine that black smoke is leaving your body. And with it, it's drawing out every negativity, every pain, every mental affliction, any anger, impatience, anything that is holding you back from being everything that you can be, reaching your full potential. So let's just focus for a few minutes on that. Any thoughts that arise, just let them pass and just focus on that light coming in and all the negativity being released. Just feel yourself being completely cleaned in every way with every inhalation, and then releasing anything that feels toxic or impure. And then just feel that you've been totally purged of any negativity. And just feel that purity, that clarity. And then let's dedicate that. And then when you're ready, you can open your eyes and join us again in the virtual room that we're in. So I wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about, and I think we have talked about this in various ways over the last 3 classes, but just, reminding, we talked about the body posture, but preparing for meditation, the other ways of preparing, classically. So doing something to one of those stabilization meditations, whether it's watching your breath for just a few moments. That's a really good one. Or even you could do a meditation like we just did as a way, although that's multifunctional. So it's stabilizing, but you're also meditating on an object. So not only the breath, but the purification aspect of the breath. But that puts our minds sort of in neutral and really prepares us. And then, of course, motivation, bringing to mind why you're doing the practice, why you're here, why you're engaging in that practice. And then, of course, the practice itself, and then the dedication. And all of these are things that, we've been doing, but just sort of bringing to the forefront that, these are parts of the actual practice, this preparation and setting up for it, kind of just, formalizing a little bit of structure. But then I wanted to chat about what our daily practice is, because I have the sense, that the couple of you that have been on a few times, I know, have been meditating for quite a while and have a personal practice. And this is supposed to be really a intro class. And so I'm going to pretend in a way that everyone isn't as experienced and knowledgeable as they are, in case there's anyone else out there in the virtual world who might benefit from us pretending like that a little bit. But I wanted to talk about just the everyday benefits. So again, and we touch on it every time, there's a higher reason for being here. And I'm just always acutely aware that especially new people, and I think, and I guess all I can do is draw from my experience and conversations I've had with friends, but I've said before that I think sometimes real beginners have, I think we all as human beings have within us a deep desire to really help others. And sometimes it's covered by a host of other things. But I think if you unpeel away even things that look like real negativities, they're all just coming from suffering. There is deep in there a desire to love and be loved. And I think sometimes giving voice to that, it seems so impossible often, depending on where we are in our lives. It can seem very impossible to be even free of our own mental afflictions, let alone, being able to help others. And so getting in touch with that motivation, I think, is really valuable. And I think having people say that it's possible, it's not something that is going to happen instantly. We don't want to set up expectations that are unrealistic with what our practice is going to do short term. In fact, I think what happens in my experience, and many of my friends would say the same thing, and I'm interested to hear your experiences, but when you first start meditating and looking at your mind, sometimes it almost feels like you're going backwards. but what's happening is that you're actually becoming more aware, just more tuned in with where your mind is. So sometimes that can feel in the beginning like, oh my gosh, my mind is getting worse, and we can get really discouraged. But it's just that we're suddenly watching, this thing that has been gone untamed, for countless lifetimes, right? We're finally trying to put the reins on and kind of bring it in. And so I just wanted to, and you may not be in that place right now, but maybe with the mind of someone else might go on YouTube and tune into this course, and maybe you can say something kind of inspiring or just something that they could relate to as they're beginning to do a meditation practice. But I wanted to open it up to that, like if you wanted to share either about your current practice or maybe what it was like for you when you started your meditation practice. And I'll just pause and I'll be quiet for a few minutes and give people an opportunity, and then no pressure. You don't want to share anything. And that's okay. Oh,
Only if nobody else comes forward, I'll say something. But if anyone else wants to go, you go ahead first. I wanted to say that on the strange side, I know one lady who, in a very conservative environment, started to do what they called mindfulness. And she grew up, she would be 10 years older than me, and not in an environment where people discussed psychology or very, very private things like that. And when she started to do what they had to call mindfulness for it to be accepted, if they'd gone with straight Buddhism, it would never have taken. I'm talking about Scotland, small places in Scotland.
mm-hmm.
And what she found is that all this stuff started to come up, things from her childhood, different wounds, all kinds of stuff. And she'd never been to a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I know a lot of Americans just have a counselor or a therapist, just as you do a dentist almost, right? But that's not the case in many other countries. So the reason I'm saying this is that it can throw people who are not used to it. And
Very
she
true.
was thrown. She just didn't want to know at first, but it took her a long time to accept that this was a natural part of the process.
Yeah. And it's not that something new is happening, it's that you're tuned in and finally seeing it. And it is really helpful. Having a Sangha is so key. I think throughout my practice. And, living in Arizona, I'm farther away from, I used to be right in the middle of a Buddhist community, and then moved away and started a center and started to build something there. And then being away, it's, I can really appreciate the support and how difficult it can be if you're kind of doing this on your own. That's why it's so great to have resources like this. But our minds are, again, they're always doing crazy. It's always doing crazy things. And so we're just kind of tuning into it. And just, I think knowing that takes a little bit of the edge off, hopefully, and then having other people that you can talk to about your practice, a friend, someone that you trust, I also think, we've been so blessed, to have amazing teachers. And then sometimes it can feel, it is for me that they are so far beyond me, right? That sometimes it's nice to connect with someone who's maybe a step ahead, or 2 or 3 steps ahead. And that can be inspiring. And then, maybe having a friend who's a step or 2 behind, and then you're kind of helping them, and it actually functions to help you. It's nice to have it's not always practical for everyone, but it's really nice to have a meditation buddy, just someone who will ask you, hey, did you meditate today? How did your meditation go? Did anything come up for you? Or, sharing where you're comfortable to kind of share what's happening in your own practice. Some of the benefits, I think, when you talk about a friend being in a community where it's kind of odd and other people aren't engaging in the practice. For me, my family, they're not Buddhists. They didn't really understand. When I first met the Dharma, of course, I did what, lots of extreme people will do. I'm like, oh, I have to quit my job and go and live in a Dharma center, which was wonderful experience. But it's also, to kind of stay where you are in the job you're in, with the people that you're surrounded by and practices is also incredibly valuable. And, but, my family didn't understand necessarily what I was doing, and it seemed weird. But as I began looking at myself, and I think I shared, I think to the outside world, in some ways, maybe I didn't even look as nice or as generous. We talked about that early on, that suddenly you might try to have more boundaries, right? And you're being more mindful and just more aware of, like, what's my motivation? Why am I doing these things? And trying to, understanding hopefully that in order to care for others, you really have to be healthy yourself. So you have to take care of yourself. And so that can feel strange. And I shared, for me, I did a lot of things that looked very nice. And not that I'm not a nice person, but there was something another motivation going on. It wasn't always just a pure thing of doing something for someone. Totally understand. Hope that you don't, but totally understand if you do. But what happened gradually is I changed and I was different. So when conflict would arise, there was a way that I was conditioned to sort of responding kind of in kind, or, saying things about other people behind their back, little things, nothing terrible, nothing that on the face of it looked like, I was a bad person, but they were not things that I want to be, not a way that I want to be. So, the subtle competitiveness or the little bit of pride and ego kind of coming up. And full transparency, I still have that, but I have a lot less of it. And the fact that I have a lot less of it showed to the people who knew me before. So, after a while, it's like they could see, and whether people knew that I was a Buddhist or not, but certainly my family did, they could see changes in me. And one of the things that I've seen as a result is that many of my relationships have totally changed. Not that I don't have some that are still sometimes challenging, but now when there's a challenge, I'm looking at my own mind and how am I responding? And is this how I want to be showing up in the world? And the more that I've kind of done that, it's really changed my relationships, personal relationships, at work. Again, not perfect, but I can say that for me, that's been a huge benefit of my meditation practice. I don't know if anyone else wants to share maybe what they've found in their lives, how meditation's helped. Again, I'll shut up for a minute. I'll be quiet for a minute. without any pressure for anyone to add anything if they don't want to.
It's not that I don't want to share. I'm kind of a novice, you know, in this group. My Buddhist experience is relatively new. It's like only a couple years old. And before that, I kind of made up my own kind of meditation practice. So I don't real, you know, like I definitely see the difference in what I was doing before and what I'm doing now. I think that I've come a long way. As far as knowing, you know, whether it's helping my mind, I know that it is. I'm alone here. I'm a lone practitioner and alone societally. So I don't really get many challenges to really test the skills. But I'm going to be spending some time with family in a couple weeks, 3 weeks. And like they, you know, certain people know that I'm a Buddhist, and now the world knows, and because I'm on YouTube, but yeah, I'd be curious to see if they see a difference, you know. I think they do anyway, you know, like through our communications, but this will be the first time in quite a while that we're all together. And, you know, see how I handle some of the conflict, you know. So it'll be a test.
Yeah, I think those are good tests, right?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
And even if we're not showing up exactly how we want to, you know, exactly what our aspiration is, I think that's another thing that I've said this before. Our aspirations are so high, and often where we are, there's such a gap, and it's an uncomfortable gap. But I think there's such merit in hanging on to those aspirations, even as you're like really grappling with like, here's where I am, and being gentle with yourself, but just, you know, that it's sort of like the spiritual grit, you know, of like, okay, there's where I want to be and there's where I am. And that difference feels uncomfortable. And so I think gradually, you know, the idea is not, you know, there's always this analogy of like a rubber band or something. Like we want to be gradually increasing our capacity, but not ripping it, you know, not hurting ourselves, not stretching beyond what we can do. I said, maybe the first class, I always bring up Master Shantideva, you know, Guide to Bodhisattva's Way of Life. It starts small, you know, start small. And these stories of Buddhist saints doing these, like, you know, giving up their bodies, you know, their most precious self, sacrificing that. But the idea is to be able to do something that's sustainable, that you could do that and do it happily. And you know, to me, like just thinking like, wow, to be able to do that is one thing, to be able to do that happily. And it's possible if we gradually are stretching. And I think, you know, family, all of those things can be really challenging because they're the people who know us. Well, it's interesting. They've known us the longest. And so sometimes I want to say, oh, and they know us the best, but not always, because sometimes we're in the box of who I was 10, 20 years ago. And then I'm trying to evolve and change. And then sometimes you get with, you know, your family or, you know, people you've known for a long time, and for them, you're in a box. And so that's not always comfortable. But you know, with our practice, hopefully we can be more gracious with them, but also kinder to ourselves, and you know, taking a break if we need it. You know, this is the purpose of like long retreat, is just that. It's like going away, being with our own minds, practicing so that we can come out into the world and show up in a different way, in a better way, in a way that is more aligned with what our aspirations are. And I know from my experience that meditation can do that. And I sense that, and those of you who've shared over, the last 4 weeks, I sense that you have that experience as well and are benefiting from that. And I'm just kind of taking a step back, given that it's our last gathering, and in case someone else ever stumbles upon this, to sort of take heart and kind of hear a little bit about what some of the benefits are just in our daily lives, in our jobs and relationships. And I think also how we see ourselves too. So I kind of want to pause and see if anyone has anything that they want, any questions or comments or anything at all that they would like to share. If we were all in a room together, I'd feel the energy that someone wanted to say something, but I just can't. So
yeah, I'll share. I started meditating about 20 something years ago, but stopped for whatever reason, and started up again in the last 4 or 5 months. And like you said, it helps. It's definitely beneficial, but it also, it's challenging to face yourself at times. Face whatever's going on in your head and trying to overcome it. Because you have good days, good weeks, then all of a sudden it's back again. It's like, what happened? I thought I had it all covered. It's over, but no, it still comes back.
Yeah.
So yeah, like you said, you got to write it out and be gentle and take your time, have patience.
yeah, no, exactly. It's like 3 steps forward, maybe 2 back, but it's still progress, right? It's still progress. And being kind to ourselves, I think, is so important. So important. I've had friends share, even thinking about, our teachers' kindness. Sometimes I've had thoughts like, well, I'm not deserving of blah, blah, or I'm not a good enough practitioner. I'm not devoted enough. I'm not, consistent enough with my practice. Once I said to Lama Zopa, like, I'm so sorry, I'd broken, commitments, like not, doing mantra recitations and things I was supposed to do. I said, I'm so sorry, I broke my samaya with you. And he said, well, did you lose faith? And I go, no.
Shorty?
And he, yes. And he said, then you haven't broken your samaya. And I was like, oh, thank goodness. Just that I hadn't lost my faith. I hadn't lost my devotion. My capability.
I was there for the 2 seconds. I was trying to get bitten like 10 times.
Oh, yeah, by the way.
Yeah. So feeling like I don't deserve the blessings of the lamas, then all I have to think is, if they are who I think they are, if they are who they are for me, then of course they love me. Of course they love me. And then I think about, my own capacity to care for others. So there's another handout. So this body of light meditation, I wanted to, if no one else wants to kind of chime in, I'll move along. But I wanted to do that. Oh, kind of thinking again about, so this is a meditation where we're visualizing this purity. And I, in a beginning class, sometimes I would be reticent to say blessing, but I think that's understanding what that means, right? It means having something poured into you. Often, as a Dharma student, it's the words of the teacher, it's the knowledge, it's someone sharing truth, someone sharing Dharma with us. And that's a kind of a blessing. So in this meditation, we visualize, and you're probably already familiar that there's meditations where you're visualizing a being. So whether it's your teacher or Lord Buddha, maybe they're one and the same. For you, we visualize that and we visualize a blessing. In this case, we're just sort of thinking about visualizing above our heads a sphere of light. And I'm just going to talk through it a little now, and then I'll lead, but I want to give you the space to do your own visualization. So I'll kind of run through what it is. So a sphere of light above your head, and that is the embodiment of every good thing. It's the embodiment of purity. It's the embodiment of wisdom. It's the embodiment of health and happiness and compassion and love. Every blessing or goodness that we could possibly imagine is just in this sphere of white light above our heads. Maybe it's a little smaller than our own head. And just visualize that. And then we're going to imagine that getting smaller and smaller, and then coming down through the crown of our own head. And depending on how comfortable you are with thinking of like being blessed, I mean, I think that's appropriate. Imagine that white light coming down through that central channel right in front of your spine and stopping at your heart. And then visualize that there at your heart. And then imagining that white light growing. And every part of your being that it touches also becomes white light and also becomes pure and clean and wise and loving and compassionate, till your entire being is just that. And then sit with the feeling of what it's like to be that being who's made of light, who is nothing but purity and good things. And then we'll sort of sit in meditation with that feeling for a bit, and then we'll come back. We'll dedicate and come back. So take a minute. Some of you already have. Get comfortable with a straight spine. Now imagine that sphere of white light above you. It's not as important that you see the sphere of white light. Everyone isn't great at visualizing that, like in a physical way. But if you can at least feel that sphere of white light is there, and feel all of the goodness that it embodies, that purity. And now imagine that sphere of white light becoming smaller, or if it's easier for you, you can imagine it kind of melting. So either becoming a smaller sphere of white light, or the white light melting and coming down. through your crown. Blessing your mind, coming down past your throat, blessing your speech, down to your heart, blessing your body. And now imagine it growing, and every part of you that it touches also becomes light. Imbued with all of the perfect qualities of an enlightened being, infinite compassion, patience, generosity, morality, everything you aspire to. Any thoughts that come, let them go. Let them also turn into that light, that white light, pure and clear. Imagine your entire body made of light, completely pure. Every positivity, and you're shining. You can continue to just feel that, what it is to be this body of light. And if you want, you can imagine also that you're shining out those rays of purity and goodness, and sending it to countless other beings, sending it to each other and beyond. Or you can just focus on what it is like to be this being of light, shining. Imagine how wonderful it would be to feel like this all the time. No obscurations, no negative thoughts, just pure light. Now dedicate the practice and then if you want, now you can come back into the broader room. Would anyone like to share any of their thoughts about this practice or what it was like for you?
Generally speaking, I
so
just find it calming, centers me a bit, and it puts your mind right whenever it happens, whenever I do it. Sorry.
yeah, I always feel very different, like something, it's almost like I don't know, twilight or dawn or just that everything sort of shifts for me, inside and outside. This particular meditation, I even sort of took it into something because for me, when I feel that sphere of light and that purification happening, and imagining my own being becoming made of light, it just for me really brings bodhisattva aspiration to the forefront for me, because then it's like, oh, if I'm this body of light, if I become essentially this sphere of goodness and purity and all of these qualities, then I want to shine that out. I want to send that out. I want to share that with every living being. It just pulls me into that space. It just feels really lovely to connect with that feeling, even just a little bit for me. Anybody else want to? Again, no pressure at all. I just want to create space. So I think talking about benefits of meditation, for me anyway, what I just said, amazing benefit, because without pausing, you can do prayers and go to classes but it's these moments, I think, where we really can tap into our highest aspirations, when we're just sort of quiet and feel what that feels like, what it would feel like, not to be limited by my own small kind of mind or distracted minds, because that's where we can go when we are quiet and with ourselves. We can go somewhere different, somewhere bigger. I don't want to, yeah, again, I just want to create the space, but I think hopefully you all know that you can chime in if you have anything that you want to say or add. Why are you laughing?
Oh, my son just came towards me. Give me a big hug.
Oh, oh, sweet. How sweet. Nice. So I was hoping for like lively discussion, but not having lively discussion is okay too, so long as everyone is good and happy and if anybody has questions or comments or challenges, because I'm sitting here saying, oh, this is a great meditation for me. I feel in touch, puts me in touch with my bodhisattva aspiration. And someone else might be feeling like, well, I don't know, this isn't working for me for some reason. It doesn't feel natural, or I don't want to create a problem where there isn't one. But people have different things that are challenging for them. One of the things I brought up, so another confession, because classes are good for that. I'm not great at visualizing physical things. It's interesting. Certainly I can visualize certain deities. I can visualize my Lama. But sometimes a visual image, even as I say, I can visualize my Lama, I can visualize certain deities. Even that is not always true. Sometimes the physical form is not as clear as the emotional or kind of spiritual content, for lack of, I don't know how else to describe it, but the feeling of them being there, the feeling of their caring, the feeling of their love, or the feeling of purity, the feeling of compassion. Sometimes that for me is clearer. So I also like to kind of just offer that in case everyone isn't as visual. If visualizing something, that's something you can work on, but if you can get in touch at least with the feeling, that's a great way to start. And then you can kind of, as you progress with your practice and visualization, keying in and trying to create more discipline around cultivating a mental image, but just not to stress if that's not something that comes to you right away. So if there's no discussion, then I can, I'll pause a minute, but then there's a very last meditation to do, which is actually, what is it called? There's an official name for it. It's I should know. Oh, equanimity. Equanimity meditation. That's the big official name. But equanimity meditation, both of these meditations and the meditation on light and being purified and kind of eliminating things that are negative and toxic. All of these meditations really are kind of the foundation for other meditations. So you may have heard, and probably everyone on this Zoom has heard of like Tonglen, exchanging self and others. Even tantric practices have many of the same elements. Things dissolving into light, coming in, blessing you, all of those. So these are really a great foundation for additional meditation practices if you're not already familiar with them. And just doing these meditations is really helpful to kind of reset if you've been having problems kind of focusing, maybe going back to more basic kind of versions of those meditations and doing those. And then, maybe even using those as a starter meditation before moving into doing something like Tonglen or exchanging self and others. So equanimity meditation I'll describe it first, and then that way I won't be talking too much as I lead you through the meditation. I'm just always so aware. So I've had great meditation teachers, but I've also had times when someone is leading the meditation and I'm in the middle of this feeling, thinking of the friend, or thinking of the enemy, or thinking of the stranger, and I kind of have something, and then they move on to the next thing. So I want to create enough space for us to have our own individual meditation. So what we're going to do here is bring to mind 3 different people. First, someone who is close to us, a friend or a loved one, and then that's someone who's cherished, and then someone who is typically, we would say, like a stranger, so a person that we don't really have any strong feelings towards. You could say indifferent, but I think people on a spiritual path, often we're not consciously feeling indifferent. It's sort of like we're just not focused. And the minute we focus on someone, usually we can feel some kind of warmth, hopefully. But to the extent that they're less cherished or treasured than the loved one, someone that we're more lukewarm about. And then the last person, classically they say enemy. This is another thing when people are like, well, I don't have any enemies. So, and you probably don't have any like hardcore, nemesis in the world, but just maybe someone who's challenging for you, that when you think of being with them, it's just challenging. And your goodwill, your generosity, your compassion, maybe it's not that it's totally not there for them, but not there for them as readily as it is for others. And maybe it's a little more challenging to cultivate that for them. So we're going to think about each of those people. And when we think about the friend or loved one, we can imagine a situation, like imagine, someone betraying you or hurting you, how some of the feelings, some of the close feelings that you have for them could change. We all have people who we've loved in our lives, and maybe now that we've just lost touch and they're no longer, they're not an enemy, but we don't have them near and dear anymore. They're more in that neutral category. So they can become that. They can become neutral. And they can become difficult. They can become challenging people that we want to even avoid. So that idea of this person who we have all of these good feelings for, just recognizing that this is because of it, that feeling has come about because of causes and conditions. It's something that can change. It's not a permanent thing. It doesn't come about because of some quality or characteristic that they hold truly, objectively from their own side. So, it's evolved, and often they started as a stranger. They started as a neutral person, and then somehow they became friends. So that's that person. And I think a stranger is easy. They either become someone that they either stay a stranger, but most of the people that you love today started in that position. They started as someone that you didn't know, that you had more neutral feelings towards, and then you came to cherish them. And so looking at why did you come to cherish them? And what does it feel to be indifferent to someone? And then thinking about how they can shift places. What does that mean? How does that make you feel? Understanding that, they're this person who appears today as a stranger, tomorrow could be an enemy, tomorrow could be a cherished loved one. Just kind of recognizing that. And then thinking about the person who's challenging for you, how those situations, that the causes of that can change, and that can change. They could become loved and cherished, or they could drift from your life and become something neutral. So really looking and asking, So where is the friend? Where does the friend exist? Where does the enemy exist? Can you really find them? Is there such a thing from their own side? So looking at that impermanent, transient situation, like that reality of that, and in the light of that, then does it make sense to just only to cherish some and not to cherish others, right? So what does that mean in terms of expanding our love and compassion? You know, is it can we loosen up those definitions? Can we care more about the person in the stranger category? Can we love and cherish the person in the friend category, but can we loosen the attachment there where we care for them, but with the understanding that that could be a fluid situation, so that the love and compassion is there, but the grasping, can we decrease that? And then thinking about enemies and where do they come from? And again, can we kind of loosen that? Is there space for them to change positions? What would that feel like? So that's the meditation. Before we start, because I do want to give everyone room to, and maybe I'll just say, you know, meditate on your friend, and give you space to do that. And then, you know, now bring to mind the stranger, and then the difficult person. So before we start, because I want to create the space, does anyone have any questions about what we're going to do? Okay. All right, great. Then, and I'm sitting weird in this chair. So let's just kind of straighten our spine, get somewhere comfortable. Take a minute to settle our minds, paying attention to our breath. And then set your motivation for doing the practice. Nominally, what would you like to get out of it? And ultimately, why are you here? And now let's take a couple minutes to meditate on the friend, our friend, or loved one. If your mind wanders, just bring it back to your friend. When you're ready, you can shift your focus to a neutral person, stranger. And when you're ready, you can turn your attention to the difficult person.
having reflected on these three different people, kinds of people, and see how easily one can become the other. Can you see that there's no real difference? They're each eligible to become something different. We would say that eligibility is their emptiness. And so if there's no difference, then can we wish all of them happiness and well-being? So when you're ready, you can come back into our virtual space. Would anyone like to, I don't know, comment or anything? In the absence, but unmute at any time. I will share that when I met the Dharma, the idea of equanimity was sort of one of the last things that I, on a surface level, became acquainted with, that I had a hard time swallowing, because I didn't understand what it meant. My interpretation of equanimity was, I was focused on, first of all, I didn't want other people to have equanimity towards me. So there's one thing, there's one honest thing. I wanted to be special. And I also didn't want to give up the specialness of my special people, the people who were in the friend category. And I'm not going to be ashamed to say, because I'm just human, but I look and I think, wow, I really didn't understand that the object of this is to raise. It isn't to lower anyone. It isn't to make anyone not special. It is to raise everyone, to bring everyone, ultimately these practices, the culmination of them is to bring everyone into that most cherished, wish-fulfilling jewel category. That is the direction that we're going. And the thing that we label friend or loved one is often, and I think we have sort of talked about this in earlier sessions, these good things like love and compassion and patience, they get intertwined with something negative that pollutes it. So in this case, attachment, and how do you know you have attachment? Well, if the person doesn't do the thing that you kind of want them to do or need them to do for you, like love you back, then your feelings about them completely change. And what this meditation does is it frees you. I mean, not instantly, not one meditation session, but meditating on equanimity frees you from that limitation where the precious are conditionally precious.
because you decouple the mental afflictions that are all around that, and you're left with just the preciousness of those beings. You're left with the love and the compassion. You decoupled that. And then starting to tap into and cultivate for people who are in that category of stranger or challenging person, you know, so ill will, you know, and I'll just kind of throw this out, but sometimes we have a feeling someone does something negative. And you know what? It's easier when they're kind of a stranger. What about these people who are, you know, whether it's a politician or someone like that? Okay, they're kind of a stranger, but they're not a stranger. And we can cultivate really strong feelings about them. And we can cultivate kind of like an ill will. Like, you know, we believe in karma. We want them to get theirs. You know, I'm sort of tongue in cheek, but I'm guilty sometimes. I have flashes of those feelings. But I have enough experience or practice to know that when I have actually seen someone get theirs, when I've seen their situation change, what started as a feeling of like, oh, you know, they should get, or almost feeling not consciously, I want something bad to happen to them, but sort of subconsciously imagining it and not feeling upset by it. That's probably the extent of it. But then when I've actually had an opportunity to see where something does happen to someone, like where they do sort of get theirs, I never feel good. I always feel sad. I always feel compassion. And so understanding that about my own mind helps me not to cultivate that feeling at all. You know, when you start to do some meditating on your enemy, you know, going into some detail, if you went into detail, the difficult person, and then think about all the reasons why they're difficult, all of their negative qualities, all of the things that, you know, make them difficult for you. And, you know, think, like, let yourself, sometimes it's a natural thing that comes up, like, oh, you know, the things that you don't want them to have, or the things that, you know, you wish would happen to them. Like, oh, I wish the boss would recognize that that guy is, you know, totally lazy and whatever. And I wish he would get fired. Then step back and imagine, like, what if those things happen? And then how does that really make you feel? And I think sometimes we can really very easily get that compassion and that caring for someone that maybe we see in a moment as difficult. So equanimity is about, it isn't creating, and again, this was my early misunderstanding. It wasn't just creating a lack of passion or feeling or caring. You know, it wasn't about dulling them. It was really about decoupling it, the passion from my own mental afflictions, and then allowing, and maybe I shouldn't use the word passion, but that's what it feels like, that real love and compassion, that bodhisattva aspiration to sort of take over, and raising everyone, you know, and wishing, so that everyone that I'm interacting with, I wish them that kind of happiness. I wish them all the things that I wish for my loved ones. And I think the more I've practiced, the more I have that feeling. It's just a matter of tuning in. So consciously, I'm not always, and I wish I was, walking around loving and just consciously wishing all good things for every person that I meet. But I do have the ability to tune in suddenly, like to focus on someone. And then those feelings can naturally arise. So it is a lack of mindfulness that keeps me separated from that ever-present aspiration. I have to, you know, turn my attention to that person who I consider difficult. And then where does my mind go? Because I've done these meditations over 25 plus years. So then it's a matter of tuning in. It's like the radio station,
being mindful. That's what these practices can do. That's what these practices have done for me. And I really feel like I've talked too much tonight. We have a few minutes left before dedicating. I want to thank you. I feel so blessed to have the opportunity to connect with you guys here. And just to even, it's an opportunity to tune in. It's an opportunity to put my focus on these things. And I'm grateful for it. So I want to thank you very much for your time tonight and over the last few sessions. I want to thank the center for inviting me, Venerable Dundrup. I thank our teachers for creating the centers and the vehicle for us to even have this time together. And I want to dedicate to my friend, Venerable Jigme, and to Doris's teacher, and to all of our teachers, to the goodness and in us, that it continues to grow, that whatever aspiration we have to be helpful continues to grow, and that we actually achieve our highest aspirations, and that those beings who help us along the way, inspire us, those beings who appear as difficult to teach us patience, may all of those beings be happy. May all of our teachers have long lives. May we fulfill every wish and become ourselves a wish-fulfilling jewel for all sentient beings. I thank you very much. And if anyone wants to say anything, speak now or forever call this a wrap.
Just to thank you very much, Bonnie. It's been such a pleasure. Really precious time. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for
very
being
much, Bonnie.